Okay, so even if we have just two presentations, we have quite a number of questions. I will read them for you. First one for Regis. Power distribution is being looked at by various other groups. Is the AMCF or EHPS to be harmonized with this?
That's a good question. The idea with the special condition EHPS is not to have dissimilarity with other existing requirements. So basically, if you have a power distribution system in your propulsion system, you would just have to comply with the requirements that will be called for the aircraft, for the intended aircraft applications.
Next one on requirements. Non-aviation manufacturers of motors may not provide a traditional level of traceability. Does this exclude them from VTOL?
That's an excellent question, and that applies to various other suppliers, particularly now that we're going into the electrical and hybrid market. The answer is yes, they should be able, any design should be, or manufacturer should be able to provide or generate a set of requirements for a particular design. If you have the need for a particular part, you as the OEM or the manufacturer should be able to present a detailed set of requirements to the specific manufacturer that's providing this motor design. And they in turn should be able to provide you with a set of requirements that show that how their device actually complies to your top level requirements. And then that would become the basis of incorporating their design into your requirement decomposition structure.
And from a regulator perspective, I fully agree. And so whatever you are coming from a historical industry or historical aviation industry or not, you will have to comply with the same requirements. Just with the small exemption that was presented by Guillaume on safety for DAL D, whereas we accept some relaxation for COTS equipment. Next one on requirements. What is your suggestion for suppliers that want to do pre-development without a requirement flow down from specific aircraft development program?
Well, I always answer this by, if you want to be compliant to ARP 4754A, you have to. ARP 4754A dictates an aircraft down process that looks at the whole aircraft all the way down to the firmware and software as one big system of systems. So again, sub-tier suppliers need to be able to provide you with distinct requirements of how they show compliance to your requirements. Show compliance is the most important thing in order to be able to tie it into the various safety requirements and system assessments, regardless of what DAL level that you're using. Yes, there are some exceptions for DAL D, but primarily, too many devices are not DAL D anymore. You know, we're typically dealing with A, B, and C systems out there. So every supplier who wants to be part of a program needs to be able to provide you with a set of requirements. Even for COTS or legacy equipment, I think this is a question I get a lot. They may be able to use service history, but service history alone, as you all know, is not the means of compliance, right? You can use service history, but you would still need to augment that with either additional requirements as well as possibly additional delta testing to cover the gaps.
So a general question, but I think more specifically for Regis. Are energy reserves considered in the various AMC presented?
So it's not part of the special condition EHPS, but there is indeed normally an accepted means of compliance that will be proposed for the energy reserve.
For eVTOL and electrical and hybrid propulsion system, is there any requirements or special condition for the power takeoff and power injection limit for the propellers or the vehicle?
So not really, there is no requirement as such. I mean, it's up to the applicant to define the power rating of its systems and to demonstrate that the system can operate safely on these ratings. Maybe one point to add on this, if you have a full electric system, keep in mind that you have to provide the declared rating of your propulsion system during the whole flight. So meaning that you need to take into account the state of charge and state of health of the battery that will decrease with the time. And so you will have to provide the power ratings that you will define up to the end of the flight.
Many newcomers in aviation industry through VTOL have innovative CONOPS, new concepts for safety requirements, so any change in design organization's evaluation planned.
The process itself has not changed just because we're going to VTOL. And, you know, there are, because of the fact that we don't have a lot of guidance right now in the industry regarding a lot of this new technology, we rely primarily on issue papers or special condition papers that we need to answer. But the underlying structure of how we use requirements, compliance, ARP 4754A, 4761, those elements have not changed. Compliance to 1309 is compliance to 1309, and you know, that is not altered by VTOL or any other new hybrid technology that's introduced. The only thing that we would probably see change there, and I wouldn't say probably, definitively, is the fact that since we don't have distinct regulatory guidance for a lot of this stuff, we rely primarily on special condition papers.
Yeah, so this special condition or IP from the FAA are actually not visible today from the VTOL community because it's shared only with the applicants that have applied to EASA or FAA for, let's say, advanced flight control system or very integrated designs. But the package is ready. Now, back to propulsion, where motor performance degrades with time can continuously monitor, provide sufficient assurance for certification.
Yeah, again, it joined a bit what I said before. The easy answer is no. Basically, you have to, the power ratings that you will declare as performances of your propulsion system, you will have to provide this rating, this power for the whole flight, but also for the whole life of the propulsion system.
Back to requirements. The classical approach to requirements does not work when the majority of a system is a COTS. Should we look for new tools?
Another very good question. I get this a lot. The answer is no. The existing regulations, both under FAA and EASA, are sufficient to cover this. The issue is compliance. I think a lot of suppliers try to use the COTS as a means of not providing the additional evidence, but we still have to follow the process. We still have the suppliers, even if it's COTS or legacy system that's been out there for 20 years or more, they still need to be able to provide a distinct set of requirements to show compliance. Service history alone is not a means of compliance in and of itself. So just saying that my product's been flying out there for 25 years and we've never had a failure, that's not a good answer. We will take into account service history, but we also have to look at it from the application-specific installation and the architecture to which that COTS device is going to be installed, because we need to let the process itself work, provide us what the additional gaps are, and if the supplier needs to go out and do additional testing, then we would have to impose that on them if they want to be part of that aircraft design.
And we can take the next one on requirement, which is in the same line. So if a design doesn't meet the original design requirements, are the openings for the use of operational limitation to learn from in-service experience?
I think it's along the same lines that we just answered. You know, while service history definitely can be used, you cannot use it in and of itself alone without any additional testing. Remember, ARP 4754A and 4761 are written specifically for your type design, for whatever architecture you are putting in for your application. So it's very design specific. So while we can take the same COTS device and use it on 10 different platforms, and why we will still take service history to some level of credit taking. In and of itself, we will probably need additional testing for each platform that it is used, because the way our regulations are written, they're written application-specific, architecture-specific. So no two designs are the same here. So we have to look at it from that perspective, which means that there'll be delta testing every time you use a COTS device. Service history will be taken into account for some percentage of that, but in and of itself, it's not going to be sufficient to give you 100% coverage.
And more generally, from EASA perspective, so you may have seen that what is unique in this package of AMC which is presented is a consideration of the operational use of the product. And we have, for the first time, introduced quite a strong link between operation and objective and safety objectives. So we accept different level of validation verification or different level of probabilities for failures depending on the operations. It means that we will accept operational limitations as a mitigating factor in some cases. But if you want to do, let's say, commercial activity, you will have to comply with the highest level of safety. But if you accept to limit your operation in lower level of less demanding operation, it can be done. So it's reflect back to the presentation from Jean-Christophe Lamy earlier today, where he presented that for some VFR operation, when there are no clouds, you can have less EF and lightning requirements. But the basic principle is to link certification requirements with the type of operation, which is a regulatory concept that was introduced by the drone, and that now we are transferring slowly into the more conventional type of products.
That's correct.
And the last question, I think it's for you, Regis. So you mentioned CSE and FAR33. Thanks for not forgetting CS22 subpart H on engine and CS22 subpart G for propeller as possible light aircraft codes.
So that's a good feedback. No, we did not forget them. So CS22 subpart G for the propeller, they are all of the scope. So propeller are considered as a product in themselves. But for the CSE 22 subpart H engine, basically you will find this in the AMCs. So if you develop a propulsive system for a sailplane, you will be able to use the already existing special condition for electrical engine, for example, in that context.
Then thank you very much to all of you for your questions. Thanks to the presenters. I'm glad to report that all the presentations are now available on the EASA website, on the same page where you have the agenda and the brochure, so you can download the full package right now. Please be back in the big room. We are all back in the plenary at 1:45.